we understand what you're doing well, like in 2 minutes. That will be very quick. And then I'll do a set of 3 questions. You can take any of those questions and delve into it from the perspective of what you're doing as an organization and what your thoughts are on the topic as well. And then I'll now open the session to the floor so that we hear more from the floor. So I think I'll start with Ben to just do 2-minute introduction, and then Lucky, and then like that. And then I'll put in my questions. Yes.
Very good. Hi, everybody, and thank you. My name is Ben Crawford. I'm the CEO of CentralNIC. CentralNIC is actually a 23-year-old company that started off as a registry service provider. And we really came into prominence in about 2013 when we became the back end for many of the most successful new GTLDs. And we simultaneously listed on the London Stock Exchange at that time. We very quickly took some of our domain names like .xyz, .online, .site, .website, and so on from 0 to over 1 million domains under management in the space of a couple of years, and we have 30% market share among all new GTLDs. But as many of you know, that business plateaued very quickly, and we really turned our attention then to the rest of the GTLD world and the rest of the CCTLD world. And the way we did that was we realized that for the CCTLDs to grow, we needed to address more than just registry software. That's only a small part of the issue. So very quickly, we started acquiring other businesses. So now we're among the leading reseller platforms in the world under the brands Key Systems and Hexanet, among others. We operate 13 different registrars under brand names like Monica, DD24, Instra, Only Domains, Africa Registry, among many others. And then we also operate a large corporate registrar called Brand Shelter that manages domain portfolios for companies like Mercedes-Benz and Johnson & Johnson and so on, particular country codes around the world. In addition to that, as far as our CCTLD practice is concerned, we've looked at particularly policy advice. So we have a whole policy division that works with CCTLDs on that, global sales and marketing, finance, and also the integration of things like registry platforms, partnering with telcos in country, for instance, to sell domain names, with company registration, bureaus of government to equip them to sell domain names. So overall, our philosophy is very much looking at the global ecosystem of domain names, both in country and internationally, and providing multiple levels of support there. And we do that for about, I think, 14 CCTLDs around the world.
Good, I think it's afternoon now. Good afternoon, colleagues. My name is Lucky Masilela. I'm from South Africa. I'm the CEO of ZA Central Registry. We are currently responsible for 4 products under the name the CCTLD.ZA. We administer CO.ZA, org.ZA, web.ZA, net.ZA. This total number of registrations under this, it's in the region of 1.25 million names, and I think it's the largest number of registrations on the continent. And we also are the applicants successfully for the 4 GTLDs, probably the only 4 GTLDs that are currently operating on the continent, which is .Joburg, .Cape Town, .Durban, and the most important one that is being sponsored by the African Union, which is .Africa. And we think this is an important digital identifier for all of us on the continent. And we see .Africa not only competing with the CCTLDs, but it's complementing the CCTLDs. For us on the continent, 55 countries, we have 55 CCTLDs to choose from, plus one, which is your .Africa. So these are the choices that are open for us, and we are administering this name .Africa under a different company called Registry Africa, which is situated or incorporated in Mauritius. And over and above this, it has very critical responsibilities that it is undertaking, .Africa, which Mr. Mokhtar Yedeli talked to earlier on in the morning, addressing issues of content, issues of registry growth, registrar growth, and Pan-African ICT programs. I think we will talk more as we proceed during our deliberations. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Michele from Blacknight. We're the largest hosting provider and registrar in Ireland, which is quite far away from here, I think. Happy to be here. So, unlike my colleagues to the left and to the right, we are primarily a registrar, not a registry. So my role today is to kind of point out to the registries what they're doing wrong and how to make life easier for registrars and how to get down from their ivory towers. So I will be the one disagreeing with everything that Lucky says. So no matter what Lucky says, I will disagree with it on principle. So I mean, as a company ourselves, our primary focus has been on hosting and all the other services that go around the domains. I mean, some of the speakers earlier today were talking about the importance of content. I think that to me is absolutely vital. I mean, a domain name by itself is absolutely useless, pointless. I mean, how many of you have registered a domain name? Wow. Okay, how many of you are still awake? Okay, all right, let's try that again. Please tell me that that number wasn't indicative. How many of you have registered a domain? Oh, that's a bit better. You're all waking up now. Okay, he probably didn't register a domain. He probably thought he did. I mean, just to give you some statistics. So I was looking at some of the reports from some of the other registries, just to kind of underline an important factor. You take what would be considered a very developed market, such as Belgium. 95% of Belgians have never registered a domain name. 65% of those surveyed have no interest in ever registering a domain name. And that's in what would be considered to be a developed market. So if you look at other parts of the world where the markets are suffering from other challenges, you've heard speakers talking today about connectivity, about payments, and you'll hear more about that over the coming days. Just something to keep reminding people of is that while the domain names are obviously the focus of a lot of what we're talking about here, for many of the kind of normal users out there, they're irrelevant. They don't care. Why should they care? And I think that's the question that the registries need to help answer. Thanks.
Good day, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Moakofi Kamanga. I am representing your host, the .bw registry. The .bw registry is currently administered by BOCRA. BOCRA needs no introduction. It's a very small registry with up-to-date approximately 8,000 active domain names. And the registry follows strictly a 3R model. We do not register domain names. Yeah, I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we have a sense of where we are heading. We have one person who will disagree with two people, with three people. And we have a registry that has, looking at a continent of 55 plus 1, or is it 54 plus 1? 55 plus 1. Interesting. So maybe to get us going, and like I said, please also reflect, if you can, on the first part of today when we talked about some statistics. And we also had different perceptions on what research is coming out in terms of how the African DNS economy, so to speak, is performing relative to the rest of the world. So I'll invite your comments on that if you can. But specifically, I had three sets of broad questions for you. The first part is for registries, and really, we are in an evolving kind of industry. So, and you had Joe earlier, affiliates. So how can our registries be more agile, responsive, and innovative in this age of changing technology? You had, why should I take a domain name if I can just have a Facebook page? So how can registries evolve and actually take or keep growing with this kind of changes in the industry? But the second part is in terms of partnerships. I think, Ben, you talk about a number of partnerships that you have managed to build. Lucky, you speak about working with the Africa Union, but who else is not on the table? I think we had in Botswana that if you're not on the table, you're in the menu. But then you could also not be on the table, but probably just be on the plate, which is also on the table. So are you on the table as food or as a participant, in that discussion? So who else needs to come into this industry to partner with registries and registrars? Is it strictly 3 apps? Are those enough? If we had registries, registrars, and registrants, is that enough? Who else is not on the table with us? And I'll invite your reflections around that and how you've done it in other markets. And lastly, I'll go back to one of the fundamental questions in the opening speech on this market. Looking at Africa, I'm probably Lucky and Kamanga, you might want to reflect on this. Do we have a domain name market in Africa? Or that market only exists if certain conditions were met or some prerequisites were put in place? But if it is there, then how do we actually grab it? How do we leverage on it? And of course, Michele, I think you would want to tell the registries or reflect from a registrar perspective, what is it that these registries are not doing or are not putting in place from your perspective as a registrar? What is it that they're not supposed to do? What is it, or how are they supposed to interact with registries from a broader perspective, especially if the registrars are their shops, they are the faces of the registry. What is it that they should do to better the interaction with registrars? So I think I'll start again from my, this is immediate right. Yeah, and then we'll just move like that. And then after that, I'll open it to the floor. So yes, Ben.
Great, very good, thanks. Well, there are quite a lot of questions there. I'll address a few of them. So I think, firstly, if you look at the Western European model for CCTLDs, one thing that really stands out as being very different from the African model is that they're all, with perhaps the exception of Ireland, they're all private companies that run all of them. And in fact, it's probably not a coincidence when we think about in South Africa that the operation of the registry has been there as well, subcontracted to private enterprise. And that isn't to say that private enterprise naturally does a better job of selling more domain names, although clearly, typically, private enterprise is revenue and profit driven. It's also a matter of what the priorities are. And I would say historically for many governments, the priorities for country codes has not been to get big numbers, but rather to very carefully protect that country code and make sure that the content on that country code and that the registrations were not in contravention with the local laws or local morals and tastes and so on. And obviously that's a massive and extremely important priority for governments around the world. The way that this was typically addressed with policy was to in fact make it rather difficult for domain names to be registered. And that really for a long time wasn't necessarily a problem. I think what has changed now, and which we heard extremely eloquently from the speakers in the opening ceremony, was the digital economy has arrived, and every responsible government around the world is realizing that this represents a significant opportunity for development, for wealth creation, for employment, and for moving their workforce in their country forwards. And this is then reflected back on the country code operators and created a change of priorities there, and a real move towards opening up the country codes. So when we have a look at that, of course there are technical challenges with that, but the first challenge is a policy challenge: is how does one continue to protect the domain name space from abuse and from criminality and so on, at the same time as making the domain names easier to register in order to create a foundation for building a national digital economy. And so I think a policy is extremely important there, and then obviously having the right technology to automate that policy and to make it work. When it comes to and so for the question of is there a domain name market, of course there is a domain name market, but that market needs appropriate policy, appropriate pricing, availability, and perhaps to take lessons from other countries around the world. Again, if you have a look at pricing of domain names in, say, Western Europe, you'll find typically that's much lower than in much of Africa, and the volumes are much higher. That wasn't always the case. 20 years ago, the prices in Western Europe were more to what they are today in Africa. The policies were equally restrictive, and often there were government, universities and other government instrumentalities involved in that, in the domain name space. So there's an entirely different model, but I think all of that is achievable, and obviously companies like ours and others are here to help. You asked a question about partnerships. I think among the companies that we own, Key Systems and Hexanet play a very important role in the domain name ecosystem, in that they supply the long tail of country codes to many of the largest regions of the world. So to companies like GoDaddy and WordPress and Google, for instance. And so what they do is they take away the necessity for a country code operator to try to persuade all of these registrars all over the world to integrate with them, because actually there's a more simple method of doing that. And Key Systems, for instance, is integrated with COCA, which is clearly a back-end software which is particularly suited to smaller domain names, and obviously very popular here in Africa, and ones also that are working with limited budgets. And so there is a method for actually achieving sales all over the world by using partnerships that are already in place, maybe just unlocking the power of the partnerships you may already have. Another very important area for partnerships, and perhaps the best example of this in the world, is in the United Arab Emirates, where Etisalat, the national telco, is the largest registrar with over 70% of all domain name registrations. And Etisalat and the CCTLD registry were in fact part of one government department at a certain point, and then Etisalat was spun out. And that really provides an excellent example, because if you think about it, in most countries around the world, and particularly in Africa, the largest tech companies with the most engineers are telcos. The companies that already have relationships with all the small businesses and are billing them are telcos. The companies that brought the internet into those countries are telcos. And so we certainly have an outreach program where we are trying to work with telcos to become registrars, because we think they're the best positioned companies in most countries. But clearly the CCTLDs need to be part of that dialogue as well to encourage them, because the challenge we have there is, for telcos, domain names are a very small piece of business. And so it's very hard to persuade them, because they can sell domain names and that doesn't move the needle for them compared to selling iPhones. And then lastly, other government departments, and particularly company registration departments, are a very interesting potential partner, I think, for CCTLDs. And again, they need to be technically equipped with the tools to sell domain names somehow bundled together with company registrations or with business licenses. This is an area we're also working on, and would look forward to partnering with any CCTLD that wanted to try and unlock that channel to market as well. So over to you, Lucky.
Thanks, Ben. You've covered quite a bit here, and I think, as you said, the chair threw a lot of questions. But what I'm going to talk to is the African domain market in particular, and my take is the first thing, where the clarion call would be domaining the undomained. And having said that, then we need to test if this market exists. And the easy test that one can use is to look at the mobile penetration across the continent, is to look at the use of all these other, modes of digital content that spread around, be it your LinkedIn, be it your WhatsApp. And those participants are reflective of the size of the market, the potential of the market to grow. Furthermore, we launched .Africa in 2017. And today, even though we are shy from our target that we had set for ourselves, but we are quite happy to show that there is growth. There is an uptake of domain names on the continent. We just need to create this awareness that is very critical. We need to build a groundswell in terms of relationships with our registrars. Our registrars are the channel to the market. We don't go to the market. So it is critical that the registrars play game with us, Blacknight. They need to play game with us. If we run campaigns, those campaigns need to translate in value downstream. Sensitive issues like pricing. If we run a campaign that is X dollars, it is beneficial if that benefit is also cascaded to the end user. To defeat the purpose is when that benefit is not cascaded to the end user. And that undermines that market growth. It undermines that campaign that one would have launched, where to grow the name space. Furthermore, what we need to be looking at is we need to understand, looking at the various stats that have been cited, what makes people, utilize or uptake domain names. It's because it's easy to be digitally present. But now we need to talk about digital identification. You need to be digitally identifiable. You need to have your own identity in the digital space. You don't need to rely on some other medium to be present, because once that medium is taken away from you, you have lost everything that has been following you. For example, if you rely solely in growing your business on Facebook, which is a good app, I must say, but once that Facebook is taken away from you and people are only reaching you through that digital platform, you have lost that million followers. But if you had your own domain name translated into a web page where you sell your wares, you sell your products, then you are able to retain that market. It keeps coming to you. I think Michele did not finish his idea when he said a domain name on its own is useless, it's valueless. The value in a domain name is when it's translated into an email, when it's translated into a web page. That is when the value becomes visible. This is when you are able to participate digitally and attract all the clients, potential clients that you have. The issue of content. We know that content has been one of the inhibitors. We do not have content in our languages out there in the space. And once we begin to work in translating our content onto the internet, we are going to be able to get our grandmothers or grandfathers participating in that space. You will be surprised today to notice that grandparents, grandfathers today are using mobile phones because it is easy to use it. It's a voice-driven thing. But once we bring another element on this digital, in the internet space, we are going to be able to gain this groundswell. Finally, this whole growth in the market, in the African market, requires a collaborative exercise. When I mentioned the 55 domain, 55 CCTLDs plus one GTLD, which is .Africa, it requires for all of us to understand the choices that we have that are available for us. It requires some of these Pan-African bodies like your African Union to make a statement, a clear statement. I know there are a number of declarations in which .Africa has been built around, from your OR Tambo declaration to your Abuja declaration and many other declarations that have been the fundamental foundation for .Africa. But we need more of these campaigns working with the African Union. That is the kind of collaboration that we need, not leaving out our registrars. Thank you.
So now I have to disagree with everything he just said. No, I won't disagree with everything he said. I'll just disagree. I think there's one of the fundamental issues here is that I keep hearing people talking about domain industry as if that were a thing. It's not. It really isn't. And if you keep thinking about the domain industry as if it was some kind of sacred goat that you'd have to sacrifice or look up to or something, I think that's where you're heading towards failure. You need to look at it more in terms of that digital economy. Now, so for those of us who are kind of plugged in, we can talk eloquently about how having your own domain name is so much better than having a Facebook page. So there, Lucky said it, now I've said it. It must be true. But is it? Why do people register domains? Why do people set up Facebook pages? How many of you here have a Facebook account? Pretty much all of you, come on. Come on, admit it, you know you do. Yeah, a lot of you probably have an Instagram account or something similar. How long did it take you to set up a Facebook account? A minute? 2 minutes? I mean, 5 minutes if you're on really slow Wi-Fi. How much does that cost you? Nothing. Zero. So to say that that you can say, oh, look, you should have a domain name and you should have a website because a Facebook page isn't good enough. It might be true, but the problem is making that case and so that it's, you know, that you're removing the barriers, you're removing the restrictions, making it easy for somebody to sign up for a domain name. I mean, somebody earlier today was talking about, you know, validating and verifying who the registrant of a domain name is. If you do that, you're making it harder for people to register domains. The cost is an important factor. You're not just competing against the 55 CCTLDs, you're also competing against free. If I've got the choice between free and something that costs me money, what am I going to choose? Well, obviously, I'm going to spend more money because I don't like having money. I want to just throw it away, like all business people. I mean, come on. No, you have to look at it in terms of making it an attractive proposition, giving the value. I mean, to say, and this is where I definitely disagree with Lucky, that you look at the number of WhatsApp users, that is your market. No, it isn't. No, it definitely isn't. Does your mother need a domain name? Now, my mother actually does have a domain name, but that's just because she's my mother and I gave her one, whether she wanted one or not. But, you know, not every single person needs a domain. You need to look at it in terms of what is the value that is giving? What are you giving them with that? Like selling a domain name, unless you need to pivot away from that. You need to look at it in terms of, what can I do for your business? How can I make your business more money? How can I save you money? Don't say that, oh, it's a nice idea, because that isn't what's going to work. I mean, it has to be, you have to actually add the value. I mean, I do like the idea of collaborating with the registrars, of course. And shout out to COCA for providing a platform which we love, but it's easy to integrate with. And if anybody CCTLDs aren't using COCA, you should. I don't know. I mean, I think the fundamental thing, though, comes back to things like price. You can't say to somebody, look, you need to spend $50 on your local domain name because of national pride, when they can go and spend $5 or $10 for a .com or for something else. That isn't going to work. You have to look at it, and you have to look at that price thing. I mean, the total cost of ownership. It has to make sense, especially when you're looking at that, you know, the competition that's out there. I mean, it's so much easier to just grab something with, you know, Squarespace or WordPress or something. You know, they'll throw the domain in for free. You're competing against that.
Thank you. A lot has been said by the previous speakers. I just want to address Bob's first question from the CCTLD perspective. Joe, in his presentation earlier on, mentioned security as one of the pillars of success. And I want to say, as the .bw CCTLD, we made an initiative to take a security-centric approach to ensure that we maintain the good reputation of the .bw namespace and make it secure and safe to use. We have an anti-phishing service where we continually scan the namespace in order to identify phishing and malware threats. And one of the services that we offer to our registrars and registrants is take down notifications once we identify a compromised a website. And I also want to thank our technical partners again, COCA, because they did assist us to ensure that the registry is GDPR compliant, so that it can be more appealing to international registrars and registrants. And I want to say that even here locally, we have seen registrars who are very much interested in the GDPR for some reason. And one of the services that the .bw seeks to implement, which I find very interesting, is the deceptive domain score, whereby before the issuance of a name, we can assess the likelihood of the name to attract malicious actors. So these malicious actors normally they target some specific names to use for malicious acts. In terms of partners, as a CCTLD, we have built some partnerships. Most of them are technical. We've partnered with the likes of PCH and AfriNIC to ensure the resiliency of our CCTLD. COCA, our registry software, and we've got the likes of ICANN and AFTLD. We are very active within the ICANN CC NSO and AFTLD as well. Going back to the issue of whether the domain name market is viable in Africa, I would say yes, it's very much viable. But what I see as an impediment is the lack of or let me say, unwillingness of registrars to come in and play along with us, because this is a collaborative effort. What we have seen as .bw is that most of our registrars do not want to automate their services, and that makes registering domain names very difficult for registrants. And it also affects the uptake of the .bw namespace, because I mean, if you are sent from pillar to post when you want to register a domain name, why don't you just go in on the internet, 2 minutes, and you have a .com name? So that's one of the challenges that we are facing. Thank you.
Okay, so a round of applause for that first set of questions. Now I want to come back to the floor as agreed. And because our time is running, so we'll take questions from this side. I propose that we take all the questions, and the panelists will be noting them down, and then we'll have a round of responses to those questions, I mean, from as relevant to the panelists. So if we could start from this side, and then you can just take note of the questions. Who wants to go first? This side. Some people are tempting me to, I know they have questions. I will not ask them to ask questions. Going one. Yeah. Two. Okay, I think they're making their mind. They're making up their mind.
We can argue amongst ourselves up here whilst you're sorting out questions.
Michele, did you intimidate the questions out of my audience?
Do you want me to try and harangue them into asking questions? I can do that.
So, Abdallah, you want to go first? Okay.
Thank you. My name is Abdallah Omari from Nairobi, Kenya. My question goes to, I know everybody knows Blacknight Registrar. You quoted a research which has just had a strong academic discussion on this table. It felt like a denial of services attack. When you said 95% of population in Belgium have never registered a domain, 65% have no interest. What is their e-commerce presence? If you have the e-commerce industry in Belgium, maybe you could share that with us, and maybe if you'll be kind enough to point us to that research,
Sure, I can send, if you, what I'll do is I'll share the link to the report with you. I'll give it to him afterwards, so you can share it with anybody who wants it. I'm not Belgian, obviously. Well, it's not obvious, okay. I could be Belgian, but I'm not. It was all of the country code registries in Europe have been doing a lot of work on data. So I don't know if you're familiar with CENTER, which is the European Council of Country Code Operators. So there's a group within CENTER which has been focusing on domain usage penetration. So a lot of the country codes across Europe in their reports now are really diving into what people and organizations are actually doing with domain names. So the Centre put out this kind of graphic report type thing earlier this year, which is the one where I quoted the numbers from. Now, I didn't memorize the entire report, okay? But what I will say is, if you take Belgium as being pretty advanced technically and everything else, internet penetration is going to be close to 100%. Mobile penetration is going to be more than 100%. Oh, and by the way, the mobile penetration being more than 100%, it's because some people have two phones. Before anybody looks at me and goes, huh? How can you have more than 100%? Because some people have a work phone and a personal phone. Internet connectivity there would be pretty damn excellent, and e-commerce would be very wide. I don't have the exact numbers to hand, but I can share the link. I mean, the point I was trying to make, though, is that you need to look at it holistically. You need to look at creating the reason for it. So, for example, talking about working with the organizations that are registering companies or trademarks or other things like that. Sure, that makes sense, but there's no point in just giving a new business a domain. You need to activate it in some way. So give them email, give them a single page website, give them something that they can see as a product, something that they can actually do with it. And what we see is for a lot of businesses, email is still super duper important. If we turn off our web servers, we get a few phone calls. I mean, actually, okay, we get a lot of phone calls. If the mail servers have a blip for 10 or 15 seconds, the phone system lights up like a Christmas tree. I mean, everybody goes crazy. So like email is like the killer app in 2019, which is kind of sad, but it's still there. So I think, the point is that you need to don't kind of be fixated on the idea of the domain as being important. You need to look at it more in terms of how can I encourage businesses, small and big, to get involved online in some way, and making again the argument about how that works for them. I mean, the examples I give sometimes is, in Ireland we have an organization called Guaranteed Irish. What they do is, it's all about brand Ireland, but not kind of, oh, Ireland is wonderful. It's more small little businesses that are producing Irish goods. And because of the internet, I'm able to buy beautiful handmade soaps from a small little company that is based in the middle of nowhere. They're not near a major town, they're not near a major city, but because they're online, they're able to sell it to anybody anywhere in the world. That's the kind of messaging you need to look at, because it empowers people. It helps to bring them, their products, their services, their knowledge. I think the other thing others mentioned as well about the language thing is very important. I'm a white English speaker speaking to a room full of Africans, but I'm trying my best to kind of see about how we can help and build it all together. But I'm a white English speaker, so in some respects, I want to listen to you and see what your challenges are. But I think some of the things about the actual importance of the domain is fairly global.
Okay, so we'll check the answers after all the questions. I'll come back to this side. Let me finish by this. This is a column. Okay. Yes, Mohammed. A straight question, and then we note it, and then we move.
Yeah, I think my question is to the registries. I mean, what are you doing in terms of reaching out to companies that serves SMEs and startups? I mean, web hosting companies, resellers, those are the ones who are going to bring businesses. I mean, in Africa also, we have very thriving web hosting services, resellers, mainly linked to international companies. Local hosting is an issue. Data centers, costing, in terms of bandwidth and space, those are major issues. But it's still, there's lots of business of doing international reselling. So I think it's in terms of registries, in terms of your expansion in Africa, are you tapping this market? Because if you focus only on registrars, that definitely, I mean, in Africa, I think we have handful ICANN accredited, and also there are very few in terms of requirements is very high. So it's really the way forward to bring volumes could be resellers, hosting companies, people working with SMEs, small businesses to build for them one-page websites to couple of pages websites, give them email addresses, and they're doing that I mean, that's a massive business in Nigeria and South Africa, in Kenya. So what are you doing to tap that market?
Thank you. I saw another hand. If you could say your name as well, please.
Hello, my name is Bonang. My first question goes to, since this is the 7th African DNS Forum, from inception, or from the first one to now, what impact has it actually had in the number of DNSs that have been registered throughout Africa? And as we can see that South Africa has more than 60% of the registered DNSs, we see that South Africa has a very vibrant, active marketing strategy, as we can see with companies like Nando's being the norm. So does that mean that they have been able to tap into the African market when it comes to marketing? And how are we here incorporating the strategies that South Africa has been able to implement? Hence, we see the register of the DNSs, but population-wise, they really have a small clip of the entire Africa. And you also talk about inactive DNSs, that people will just register and they will not be active. So how many of those can we say are really inactive out of the 1.6 million that have already been registered?
Thank you. I'm sure that is a question to Lucky and Ben. Okay, so we do this other row. Any question from that end? I don't see any. And then the last row. Okay, then we'll take the last one from here, and then we'll do.
Thank you. My name is Zeta. I'm quite new to this domain space, so pardon me if my question sounds ignorant. But I've been trying to purchase the .Africa domain for the past 3 months now. It has been quite a frustrating experience. Most of the domains that I've been purchasing them from GoDaddy, but it seems like GoDaddy has lost that opportunity. It was no longer selling the .Africa domain for some reason that I don't know. Maybe if you know, you could share that. But it has been quite a frustrating experience to try to get a .Africa domain. I've gone to most of these registers that are registered, that I've come across on the register.africa domain. Yes, the website, yes. And when I go to them and I try to go through that process of buying the .Africa domain, it's always a problem. So my question is, what I'm wondering is, how widely accepted is this .Africa extension? And how is it something that is currently easy to work with? Do firewalls accept it? Is spam filters and things like that? That's what I'm trying to understand. With the level of frustration that I've been experiencing, I'm wondering now, is this something that really that's well penetrated and actually working in the market currently? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Permit me to end the questions at that point because of time as well. And now I'll ask my panelists to take 2 minutes to respond to the questions, whichever you want to take. I'm sure, Lucky, you have specific ones that you must respond to, and also give your closing remarks. So 2 minutes, please. In our usual trend of Ben is closer to Bob, so yeah.
Okay, very good. So if you want to buy a .africa domain name, it's go to africaregistry.com. I don't know if we still are, but we were we sold more .africa domain names than anyone else in the first couple of weeks, so I know it works well. All right, I think on the point about 5% of Belgians registered a domain name, I guess the way I look at it is micro businesses, as a rule, anywhere in the world don't register domain names. They use free platforms. So in the United States, they use Etsy and Amazon and so on in order to trade. It's entirely normal. It's when a business gets to the size where it needs corporate email, as Michele said, that tends to be the tipping point where they say, oh, we need a domain name for this reason. We need a name that brings together all the people that work for our company. I do think, and to elaborate on what Michele said too, the linguistic groups does make a big difference, because with a country code, the fantastic benefit you have with a country code, if your country has its own specific language, say for instance, we run the country code for Slovakia. So it's a country of 5 million people with their own language. And every small business in Slovakia gets a .sk, because when you see the Google search results and you see it ends with .sk and you're a Slovak speaker, you know that means this website is in my language. And it also means this is a local supplier. And if you're a Slovak small business, you would not buy a .com, because it doesn't convey those two most important messages that you want to convey. So I do think that as CCTLD operators, you have these particularly if you have a linguistic country, a country with its own language or languages, you have some very strong advantages over the generics. But obviously, if you price too high, if you make it too difficult to register domain names and so on, you tend to lose those advantages. When it comes to the question about reseller platforms, so we operate in my view, the most technically excellent reseller platforms in the world. And we do have many resellers in the African continent. If it is an issue that you're selling the domain name to a company in Germany or Canada, and then we're reselling it to a company in your country. So, for instance, many countries require the registrars to be local companies. We'll set up a local company. We've done it in over 20 countries around the world. But our feeling is you can immediately then allow your local web hosting companies and web development companies to have excellent software which works as good as GoDaddy, but it's local. And obviously, we want them to get a healthy margin to operate the customer service for the customers in country. So we think that that's an important tool that we have for helping CCTLDs develop, is having these reseller platforms, which is like Key Systems and Hexanet. But obviously, there are others as well. Lastly, there's just a question about inactive domain names. Most domain names are inactive in the world. That's the way it is. It may appear like domain names that aren't being used have no purpose, but obviously they do, because there's literally probably hundreds of millions of inactive domain names in the world. So a lot of them are used by large companies that want to register domain names to protect trademarks. They're also used by domain investors who really want to hold the domain names in the hope of arbitrage opportunity where they can sell them for a higher price. And of course, a lot of domain names are just bought speculatively because people say, I've got this fantastic idea for a business, and they register a whole lot of domain names, and then their business never eventuates, but the domain names remain. So I wouldn't be, whilst I agree, you don't want to push domain names on people just for the sheer pleasure of registering them. That doesn't really exist. But on the other hand, there's nothing wrong. Every single registry in the world has probably most of their domain names are inactive, and that's just part of our business. I guess my final concluding remarks are just again, I think this is the way that this day has been set up, with the opening ceremony so focused on digital economy and content and so on, I think really marks the direction that our industry is moving in. And so I wasn't here at the initial one 7 years ago, but I would be surprised if there was such a focus then on this. I think it's fundamentally changing the role of the country code from just being a national marker on the internet like a telephone code. It's actually becoming a foundation for the growth of digital economy in each country, and hence part of a much broader policy discussion, which brings together government and private enterprise. And so it's obviously a very exciting time to be in this business. It's always, I think, a privilege to work in a business where, when entrepreneurs are initially trying to crystallize their ideas and make them into something new, that's where we come in. We give them those first tools to do that. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thanks, colleagues. I think on the last question, I have a lot of people who can respond to that. Ben has attempted.
I will.
And you will. I know Dr. Nee would also want to respond to that. I believe, your answers will be coming, on .Africa availability and the difficulty, the registrars around me will respond to that, But we do feel that we need to make it easy, And then coming to the issue of the reseller market, we believe and feel that that is the go-to market for us. This is how we are going to be able to grow the namespace, the uptake. We need to focus on that. We are already embarking on the reseller growth plan. We are looking at the growth of your web developers to be the first, line of, entry into this space. We have a history, where CO.za, it grew around web developers. This is how we saw this millions of registrations, It's the value that was instantly created. So we feel for every and any other name, it has to be value driven. We understand that for .Africa also, there is this difficulty, with the GTLDs to acquire those names if you are not ICANN accredited. So we have created a platform that enables all the non-ICANN accredited registrars to be able to acquire your .Africa, any of those GTLDs. And this entity is called the AF Proxy. So if you go into your web page and look up AF Proxy, you will find a platform that shortcuts this need to be registered and accredited by ICANN directly, which can be very costly. And looking at this CO.za namespace and its growth, largely we think and believe that it is a corporate South Africa that made a difference. Corporate South Africa has been very patriotic. They were the entities that swayed and improved the numbers and the uptake. And this growth has been influenced largely by them. You would see the bakkies or the trucks or their service vehicles with plumbing.co.za. That is what people saw. When they saw that, they saw this ease of entering to market, ease of being advertising your business, and people can go onto your website at night. You don't have to be called during the day, or you don't have to remember a number, your phone number that's on your bakkie, but instead you would remember plumbing.co.za and you would get that service. That was a game changer for us. Trust is everything to end users. We need to ensure that we instill the trust in the use of the domain names. The issues that we've been discussing around RRR that have been raised over and over again, we need to ensure that this is accepted and understood by our regulators. Regulators need to allow for the separation of these functions. Regulators need to regulate. They need to provide policy directive. Registrars need to provide the channel to market. Registries need to provide that signing up into the zone. And once we separate those functions, blurring of lines creates problems, but separation of these functions creates value and growth in the market, and it brings in the issue of trust that we've been talking about. Next thing is policy harmonization. These issues have been discussed at the various DNS forums, that we need to have policy harmonization. We need also to have price harmonization. Currently, one of the issues that is facing us, blank in our faces, is the fact that the pricing of domain names across the continent is as wide as the ocean. You have one country on the continent offering a CCTLD for $450, and then you have another CCTLD available for $3 to $4. If you look at this disparity, it doesn't create room for growth. Then you look at this other name that is supposed to be this good, growth factor for Africa, which is .Africa. It comes in at a price that is close to your .com pricing. Now, where do we stand in terms of price harmonization? We need, at the 8th Africa DNS Forum, or at this forum, we need to table these issues and discuss and agree on them, how best we can get the undomained domained. And these are the challenges that we need to be facing. If we can achieve that, I think we can go to the 8th DNS Forum as a happy nation, a happy continent. Thank you.
Well, Lucky never fails to deliver. He gave me a nice big thing to totally disagree with. I'm sorry, but I'm a capitalist, not a communist. I mean, pricing harmonization to me stinks of communism. We need, I think what you might be pushing for, which would make more sense, is to encourage registries to price more aggressively and more in line with the economics. I mean, if you're in a country where the average wage is, let's say, $1,000 a month, and you sell a domain for $500, then you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot. But to the other questions, I'll stop beating up on Lucky, because I mean, he already hates me. It's just going to get really painful otherwise. On the reseller focus, I think it is very important what Mohammed was saying about the hosting providers, the IT companies. I mean, as Lucky said, web developers, all of these. A lot of the registries are doing some work there, but within the 3R model, it can be a bit awkward for them to go directly to the reseller. I mean, it makes more sense to collaborate with the registrars to kind of go to those events where you're going to be getting either to potential resellers or to users of the domains. On the inactive domains, I mean, as Ben said, it's normal that there's a lot that are inactive. But if you're looking at the average small business, getting a small business to register a domain name, they're not going to be sitting on a load of domains. They're probably going to have one, maybe two. You want them to activate the domain, because if you don't, they're not going to renew it. So having large volumes of unused domains year one, it means in year two, you just have a lot of deletes, which is probably a bad idea. On the .Africa availability question, my company would be happy to sell you a .africa domain name. Unfortunately, we're not GoDaddy, or fortunately, depending which way you want to look at it. I suppose it goes to a deeper question, which is that if you look across all the new TLDs, so the .africas, .joburg, .cape town, .hosting, .press, and all these other ones, not all registrars will carry all of the domain extensions. My company is based in Ireland. We happen to carry some of the German TLDs, I can't even pronounce them, and we've sold a few. And every time I look at the reports, I'm like, oh, okay, that's nice. I don't know how that happened. But we're not going to go off and integrate with some of the registries which are specific for, I don't know, I can't even think, I don't want to offend anybody, but something very, very specific. We're not going to bother because we aren't going to get any return on it. So from the other side, with the registries that are using platforms that we're already integrated with, so CentralNIC, Affiliates, Newstar, Coca, these ones, it's much easier for us to onboard those other TLDs and offer them, though sometimes the policies can be a bit painful. I think that was most of the questions. As for the impact of the DNS Forum, this is my first time being here. I have no idea whether there's a massive impact, but if nothing else, I think it's a great opportunity for registries, registrars, and others just to kind of come together and share ideas. And anybody any registry in the room, by the way, who's looking for more registrars, please talk to me.
Just a quick one. There was a question on how we try to reach out to the international community as CCTLDs. I want to mention that as .bw registry, we have not placed any barriers on our accreditation process. So we will gladly accept any registration request from any registrar from any planet. Is welcome. Thank you.
That was the last word from the host. I think, ladies and gentlemen, this has been a very insightful session. Obviously, we've overshot our time with almost 30 minutes, but I did not see people resting their eyes. So it will not take much more of your time. Please give a round of applause to my very able panel. I'm sure they disagreed amongst themselves a lot, but this is what you get at the DNS Forum. One thing that you achieve is to be able to talk, because when we stop talking, we might start fighting. I believe it is now time for lunch, which you have properly earned.